It was 4:27 p.m. when I pulled the roast out of the oven, steam curling up and fogging my glasses. I blinked, then wiped the lenses with the hem of my apron. The house smelled like cloves, rosemary, and the cinnamon pine cones Mom kept in glass bowls by the entryway. Outside, snow was falling in those slow, deliberate flakes you see in Christmas commercials. Inside, it might as well have been summer for how warm the laughter was coming from the living room, just not from me. My family was gathered around the tree, unbothered. Calandra, my sister, had her legs tucked under her on the cream couch, sipping mulled wine in a red cable-knit sweater that probably cost more than I earned in a week. Myrna, our mother, adjusted ornaments on the tree, her eyes sharp even behind the warm smile she reserved for guests. Dad sat in his usual armchair, nodding to whatever Calandra was saying, his glass of eggnog barely touched. "Smells amazing, Orla," Myrna called without turning her head. "No one does the roast like you, honey. It's tradition." Tradition. That word had become a trap dressed in tinsel. I plated the carrots with maple glaze, stirred the gravy one last time, and set a mental timer for the rolls. 9 years. 9 consecutive Christmases. No rotation, no reassignment. I cooked, they gathered. Sometimes I'd test it, leave a dish unfinished, see if anyone would notice. They always noticed. Not because they missed the flavor, but because the system faltered. And I was the system. "Orla, don't forget the rosemary garnish," Calandra said, not even glancing away from her phone. "Presentation's everything." I didn't respond. I placed the roasted vegetables on the platter with practiced precision. The only time anyone let me sit down was when there was nothing left to be done. And even then, my seat was more of a placeholder, something temporary, out of the way. As I brought the final tray into the dining room, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Flushed cheeks, hair pinned back, apron stained at the hips. I didn't look like a guest. I looked like staff. "You okay in there?" Dad called, half joking. "Yeah," I said. "Just checking on everything." He nodded like that settled it. It was a year when the memory still lingered. 5 years ago, Christmas Eve, I overbaked a batch of brownies. Just a minute too long, really. The edges were crisp, the centers fine, but the family latched onto it like it was comedy gold. "Hope the brownies this year don't crack your teeth," my cousin Brian joked as he passed the dessert tray. Laughter erupted around the table. Myrna leaned in to add, "Just kidding, sweetie. You know we love your cooking. Well, most of it." I smiled. Thin, tight, like trying to keep a balloon from floating off when the strings already snapped. I'd prepared 14 dishes that day, 14. But all they remembered, year after year, were the damn brownies. Even my niece, who had barely learned to read back then, chimed in this year. "Auntie Orla, did you make the hard brownies again?" Calandra giggled and rubbed her daughter's back like she'd just won a spelling bee. I forced a chuckle and replied, "I made them extra soft this year, just for you." Myrna waved her hand in mock scolding. "Oh, come on, it's just in fun. Don't be so sensitive." I nodded, but inside I felt something shift. I wasn't sad, I was done. The dining table was set with our best china, gold-rimmed plates, polished silverware, crystal glasses that only came out for holidays and funerals. I placed the final dish at the center, a roasted duck glazed in orange honey. It looked perfect. I took pride in that, still. Old habits. Then I noticed my seat, or rather, the lack of one. There were 10 chairs around the table. My name card was stuck to a bar stool by the corner, near the kitchen door. Again. "We saved the good chairs for the guests," Calandra chirped, dabbing at her lipstick in a pocket mirror. Of course they had. Even the furniture had been told where I stood. I remembered something Maya Angelou once said. "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." I didn't believe them the first year, or the 5th. But tonight, standing with duck fat on my apron and a stool waiting for me in the corner, I believed them. I didn't argue. I just slid the stool slightly farther from the table, gave myself breathing room, and served the wine. Dinner passed in waves, plates emptied, glasses refilled, voices rising. I stood by the kitchen counter, holding my plate, carving bites from my roast like I wasn't meant to belong at the table. No one noticed. Or if they did, they didn't say. A few tried to rope me into selfies, but always after the good ones had been taken. "Slide in here, Orla," my cousin Melissa said, squeezing everyone else tighter to make space. I waved it off. "I'll take the picture. Better to be behind the lens than forced to smile into it." I looked at the window behind the sink. The reflection stared back. Me, a silhouette behind their spotlight. It hit me then. I wasn't born to serve this table. I just forgot how to sit at it. I set my plate down and walked slowly to the living room, where Calandra was opening gifts like a celebrity unboxing haul. "Oh my God," she squealed, holding up a silk scarf. "I didn't even know you remembered I liked this." Everyone clapped, laughed. Myrna reached for her phone to snap a photo. I blinked once. "I didn't get you that," I whispered. But no one heard. The wrapping paper was already flying through the air by the time I walked into the living room with my coffee. It was still hot, though I'd brewed it nearly 15 minutes ago. The kitchen had gone quiet, dishes stacked, counters wiped, candles burning low. It was Christmas morning, and like clockwork, the family had shifted into the tradition of tearing open gifts with such volume and speed it resembled a feeding frenzy more than a celebration. I stayed near the back corner of the room, just close enough to be seen, but not enough to be included. Myrna sat center stage, coordinating who passed what. "This one's for Calandra, from the Hendersons," she chirped. Calandra laughed, dramatic and graceful, and held up a gift bag like she'd just won an award. "Only the good girls made Santa's list," Myrna added with a wink. I took a small sip of coffee to hide my face. No one noticed, of course. They hadn't noticed for years. I stopped checking for my name on the tags after the 5th Christmas of being forgotten. At first, I made excuses for them. Maybe my gift was hidden, maybe it was a surprise. Now, I didn't even look. The only surprise left was how unsurprised I felt. Calandra's boyfriend, Austin, filmed everything on his phone, panning the chaos. Everyone gathered in their curated pajamas, squealing at candles, books, gadgets. I sat in my everyday sweater and jeans, untouched. The room was filled with my blood, but none of it seemed to recognize me. A decade ago was the last time I saw my name under that tree. It was on a silver box, simple, plain, wrapped by my Aunt Verena. A scarf, soft, warm, gray. Myrna never noticed it was the only gift I got that year. I thought about the year I decided to give gifts anyway, even after being left out 3 years in a row. I'd found beautiful wool scarves in jewel tones and spent nights wrapping them with handwritten notes. One for Dad, for your morning walks. One for Myrna, to match your winter coat. And Calandra's said, "Because I know red is your power color." Christmas morning came. I watched them open package after package. Not mine, not a single one. I asked Myrna gently, trying to sound casual, "Did you see the scarves I left by the fireplace?" She looked at me like I'd spoken in another language. "Were those from you?" "Oh, I thought they were part of the extra decorations." "You're the practical one, Orla. I didn't think you'd bother with gifts." I blinked. "But I did." "Well," she laughed, "you always say things like, 'Gifts are clutter,' right?" I had said that once, years before, when I couldn't afford presents and tried to spin it into a philosophy. They'd held on to it like gospel. It became the story they told themselves so they didn't have to think about the empty spot under the tree where my name should have been. That day, I learned something vital. Being ignored is one kind of pain. Being told it's your fault is a sharper one. After that, I stopped giving. Not out of bitterness, but because I'd learned that love only felt real when it went 2 ways. One-sided gestures were just chores. After the tornado of presents, the house shifted into brunch mode. Dishes clanged in the kitchen as Dad poured champagne into tall flutes, and Myrna began arranging croissants into a spiral on a white platter. The table filled quickly. Calandra's boyfriend pulled out the last open seat, the chair I usually took. I didn't hesitate. I turned quietly and walked toward the kitchen counter, grabbed the high stool that lived in the corner, and slid it into place against the wall. From my little perch, I could still see the table. I could hear every toast, every giggle, but I was apart, again, as always. "Orla!" Calandra called with mock enthusiasm. "We'll rotate seats for dessert, promise," I smiled, but didn't answer. That line had been used before. We'll rotate. We'll get you next round. It's just this once. None of it ever happened. Not once. I'd learned the rhythm of exclusion too well to believe in accidental oversight anymore. I unfolded my napkin onto my lap and began cutting into my egg bake. Alone. I looked around the table as I ate. Calandra's plate was half empty, but she was already raving about the mimosas. Austin laughed at everything she said, like he was auditioning for Best Boyfriend of the Year. Myrna beamed at the scene. She hadn't looked at me since I'd entered the room. I sipped my cold coffee and thought about how rituals have power. Not because they're sacred, but because they're repeated. And this ritual of being forgotten, of shrinking to make room, had been practiced too many times. A quote came to mind. Eleanor Roosevelt once said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." I used to believe that. I used to think if I worked harder, spoke less, gave more, maybe I'd be seen differently. But what if they didn't wait for my consent? What if they just took it? What if they took my place at the table, my name off the tags, my value from the family ledger, and I never had a say? Calandra raised a glass. To tradition. Everyone toasted. I watched their faces blur together, a mosaic of people who called me family but rarely made space for me in it. Then came her voice again. Aren't you gonna open yours? Calandra smiled at me across the room, eyebrows lifted, eyes sparkling. I tilted my head. Open what? She pointed under the tree, where one final box sat, white, gold ribbon, no tag. I didn't move. There's nothing left to open, I said softly. Not for me, anyway. It was 5 Christmases ago, but I still remember the way Myrna cornered me in the laundry room that morning, her voice dipped in that condescending syrup she reserved for when she wanted something. Calandra can't help this year, she said, folding a dish towel like it was evidence. You're free, right? That phrase, it still echoes. You're free, not you're valued, not we need you, just available, like an unused plug socket, a utility. Myrna didn't wait for my response. She simply turned, patted my shoulder once like I was a hired cook, and left the room. That year, Calandra had just had her first baby. Everyone called her a superhero, even though she was barely upright half the time. She wore silk robes and full makeup for family photos while I cooked breakfast, set the table, wiped baby spit off her shoulder between basting the turkey and layering the casserole. By evening, my back ached from standing since dawn. I'd cleaned every dish by hand because the dishwasher broke and no one had bothered to schedule a repair. Myrna had said, "Let's just hand wash for now. It builds character." I think she meant my character, not hers. Calandra beamed in every picture. I noticed I wasn't in most of them. My apron was, in the background, my hand pouring gravy into a dish, my arm reaching across the table to refill a glass. It was the year I realized I could be there, fully present, and still completely absent. After dessert, I collapsed on the guest room bed without saying goodnight. No one noticed. A week later, a card arrived from my Aunt Verena in Oregon. She'd written, "You must have looked so beautiful in this year's holiday card." She'd taped the card inside her envelope. I smiled before I opened it. The photo was glossy, professionally done. Calandra, her husband, the new baby in matching pajamas. Myrna stood beside them, holding a glass of champagne. Dad was there too, seated proudly in the armchair like it was a throne. The fireplace roared in the background, garland draped perfectly. Their faces glowed. But mine wasn't there. I flipped the card. From our family to yours, the last names. Simple, clean, in script. I blinked and read it again. Not even a casual mention, not a single acknowledgement, not a signature, not my name, not even an initial. My heart didn't drop. It froze. I called Myrna. I kept my voice light, casual. "Hey, saw the card Verena sent. Was there another version?" She sighed. "Oh, Orla. It was just for Calandra's first Christmas as a mom. It's a big moment, you know?" I paused. "But it says our family." "Well," she said, like explaining math to a toddler, "that was the theme. It's a branding thing. Don't be dramatic." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just hung up, then sat still for several minutes. It wasn't the card that hurt. It was realizing that being erased had become so casual. From that moment on, something inside me retracted. That holiday season changed everything, not for them, but for me. I stopped suggesting new traditions. I no longer offered to host. I stayed quiet during planning calls, nodded instead of pushing back when Calandra took credit for organizing meals I had prepped alone. It was a quiet resignation, not defeat, just distance. They never noticed. That year, during dinner, I smiled on cue. I toasted when they toasted. I helped serve, laughed at jokes, took the family photo. I looked like I belonged. But inside, I was floating somewhere above the scene, observing, not feeling. The moment that solidified, it came during dessert. I always made the pumpkin pie. I didn't that year. Calandra had bought one from a bakery, and everyone raved like it was a miracle. "Oh my God," Myrna said. "This is divine. Calandra, you outdid yourself." She shrugged, like it was no big deal. "It's just pie." I excused myself, grabbed my coat. No one asked where I was going. I walked outside, boots crunching on old snow, and wandered aimlessly around the block. The air was biting, clean, sharp. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just breathed. I stayed out for an hour. When I returned, the living room was empty. Lights still on, fire crackling, but everyone had gone to bed. No one texted. No one asked why I left. That was the first time I disappeared. Not physically, but in truth. Now, sitting on my couch in the present with the remnants of another Christmas strewn across the floor, wrapping paper, empty boxes, half-drunk wine, I realize how many times I've disappeared since then. Not all at once. A little more every year. I've stopped asking to be included. I've stopped making suggestions. I've stopped trying to matter. I pull my journal from the coffee table and flip to a clean page. "You don't disappear all at once," I write. "You fade like candlelight when the wick burns too low." I stare at the words. This year's holiday cards are stacked beside me, still sealed. I know what's in them. Smiling faces, Calandra's kids in plaid, Myrna with her signature cranberry lipstick. I'm not curious, but something in me needs to see it, to confirm the erasure I've already accepted. I open the first envelope, then the second, then the third. Not one mentions me. I'm not surprised, not angry, just steady. This time, I don't call to ask why. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a lukewarm mug of coffee and a slice of dry banana bread when I saw it, Calandra's latest post. She had uploaded an entire album from a party I hadn't even known happened. Titled Holiday Magic with the Best Crew, it showed our living room transformed. Velvet ribbon garlands, fairy lights twisted around every banister, a cheese board that looked straight out of a food magazine. Guests I recognized, some family, others from Calandra's job, all dressed in coordinated red and gold, smiling like they belonged in a luxury ad. And me? Not even a shadow in the background. The tightness in my chest didn't come from surprise. It was the stillness that scared me. I hadn't even expected to be invited. That realization, how automatic it had become to exclude me, landed harder than I could admit. I texted Myrna, choosing my words carefully. Was there a party at the house? Her reply came within a minute. "Oh, just something small with Calandra's work circle. You wouldn't have fit in, love." Wouldn't have fit in. I stared at the screen so long the light dimmed. For a second, I wanted to text back something sharp. "I live here too." Or, "You could have told me." But I deleted every version I drafted. I wasn't angry, not yet. What I felt was more dangerous. A cold clarity. This wasn't an accident. It was a pattern, gift-wrapped in tradition. 2 days later, I stopped by the used bookstore near downtown, needing to get out of the house. As I browsed the fiction section, a woman around my age approached me. Her name was Clara, a friend of Calandra's from yoga or a wine club. I couldn't remember. She smiled as if we were on the same team. "Hey, I saw photos from Calandra's party. Looked like such a blast," she said casually. "Didn't see you in any, though. Were you out of town?" I froze. My default instinct was always to protect the family. To shield the image they'd built with my silence, The answer poised itself on my tongue. Yeah, I had a thing, scheduling conflict. Instead, I surprised myself. I wasn't invited, I said. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Oh, I just assumed you two were close. I didn't reply. She offered a polite nod and stepped away, but the damage was already done. The assumption stung more than the actual exclusion. People on the outside thought we were tight-knit. They believed the image. That's how good Calandra was at managing perception. How good Myrna was at curating a story that left me out. That 5-second conversation did what years of quiet dinners couldn't. It forced me to look directly at the pain I kept hiding behind, "It's fine." That night, we had dinner at the house. Lasagna, garlic bread, some wine from a gift basket Calandra had received from work. I showed up because not showing up would still be used against me. The mood was tight, but no one addressed the elephant in the room. Calandra spent the meal chatting about the party, who came, what playlist she made, how the wine pairing was unexpectedly brilliant. She didn't look at me once. I waited for someone to say something, to ask where I'd been, why I wasn't there. But they didn't. And I realized then that they weren't avoiding the subject. They didn't think it was a subject at all. At one point, Myrna placed her fork down, dabbing her mouth with a napkin. It's become quite the tradition, hasn't it? Calandra hosting the pre-Christmas soiree. She's just so good at it. I said nothing. Just reached for my water. The silence stretched, but no one seemed uncomfortable except me. Lao Tzu once wrote, "Silence can be a source of great strength." And I believed that. But silence, when weaponized by the wrong people, becomes erasure. And I was done being erased. After dinner, I helped clear the plates. Calandra had disappeared to the sunroom with her phone, likely filtering more photos for her story. Dad had wandered off to the den. That left me and Myrna in the kitchen. She handed me a tray of glasses to dry. "You've been quiet lately," she said. I dried the first glass carefully. "Just listening," I replied. She studied me for a second too long. "You know, it's important to not make everything about yourself, Orla. We all have roles in this family." There it was again. Roles. As if life was a production and I'd been cast without a script. Later that night, back in my car, I sat in the driveway with the engine running and no destination. I opened the group chat on my phone, hovered over the keyboard, then closed it. Instead, I opened my voice memo app and hit record. "You keep calling this a tradition," I said into the phone, my voice calm. "But what you mean is, it's a habit of excluding me. That's not tradition. That's a trap." I saved the file, didn't send it. But it was the first time I'd ever said it aloud. That alone felt like defiance. When I got home, I took out my journal. Wrote only one line. "Next time they pretend I'm not there, I might pretend they don't exist." It wasn't a threat, just a decision in waiting. My phone buzzed on the counter as I folded laundry. A new message from Calandra. A selfie, her and the usual crowd, beaming under twinkling lights. Captioned, "Wish you were there." I whispered to no one, "No, you don't." She showed up at my door with her usual air of entitlement, wrapped in faux sincerity, a Tupperware container of stale sugar cookies in one hand and her phone in the other. "Your place always smells so cozy," Calandra said, stepping inside before I could respond. "Like cinnamon and competence." I raised an eyebrow. "Thanks?" She made herself at home, tossing her scarf on the arm of my couch, already half scrolling through her messages. "I have a tiny favor to ask," she began, the word tiny already making me suspicious. "You know that apple spice cake you made last year? The one with the maple glaze?" I nodded, folding my arms. "What about it?" "My office is having their holiday mixer this Thursday. It's a big one. VP might even swing by, and everyone's expected to bring something homemade. You know I'm hopeless in the kitchen." There it was, the ask. I hesitated. Every inch of me wanted to say no, but I knew how this game worked. She'd turned the refusal into a family narrative. Orla's dramatic again. Orla can't just be generous. "Just this once," she added quickly. "You'd really be helping me out." I said yes. Of course I did. I always did. She left with the cake 2 days later, glowing like she'd just delivered a baby. She texted a simple, "You're the best," and disappeared into her corporate fairy tale. Days passed. Then, while scrolling LinkedIn one morning, I saw it. A photo of Calandra, perfectly posed beside a decorated buffet table, my cake at the center, unmistakable in its glaze. Her caption read, "So grateful for the holiday cheer I brought to the team. Hosting is truly my happy place." My name wasn't mentioned. Not once. That burn I felt. It wasn't the oven. 3 days before Christmas, I arrived at the house, arms full of my vintage ornament box, expecting to help decorate like I had every year since Dad let me climb the ladder to hang the angel at age 12. The living room was already transformed. Garland hung in perfect symmetry. Gold and cream dominated the palette. Even the stockings had been changed, matching monogrammed initials, none of them mine. I stood frozen, holding my box like a child who brought the wrong toy to school. Myrna spotted me first. "Oh, honey," she said with a forced smile, "we decided to go minimalist this year. Gold and cream. The red ones would clash." I didn't argue. I carried my box back to the garage and placed it gently on the shelf next to the old snow boots no one used anymore. Even the tree, it seemed, no longer had room for me. That night, I called Marianne, my friend from work. "Do you know what my mom said today?" I started. "She said red clashes." "Wait, what?" Marianne sounded half asleep. "They redid the entire house in gold and cream. My ornaments, the ones from when I was a kid, weren't part of the plan." There was a long pause. "You're kidding." "Nope." Marianne didn't laugh. She didn't offer some trite line about boundaries. Instead, she said, "That's not family, that's emotional PR." I let that sit in silence for a beat before responding. I wasn't helping them. I was enabling them. After we hung up, I opened my journal. I used to think showing up meant loyalty, but now I think it just meant availability. I stared at that line for a long time. The next morning, Calandra sent me a text. "Thanks again for the cake. Everyone loved it. I might need your secret next year." No emoji, no exclamation marks, just this. "I hope the promotion was worth it." She called. I didn't answer. 2 nights later, we had a family dinner. Nothing special, just pasta, salad, wine. But this time, I didn't bring dessert. Not the usual pecan pie. Not my signature ginger cookies, nothing. And people noticed. "I thought you were bringing something sweet," Myrna said, voice carefully neutral. I looked at her, steady. "Oh, I figured someone else might want the spotlight this year." The silence at the table was sudden and thick. Calandra paused mid-sip. Dad raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Calandra let out a soft scoff, but no one came to her defense. The rest of the meal unfolded like it was being held together with fraying string. Small talk about traffic, weather, a neighbor's new roof. No one dared circle back to dessert. Afterward, I helped clear the plates. Calandra retreated to the sunroom, scrolling on her phone. Dad disappeared into the den. Just Myrna and I remained in the kitchen, hands moving over warm dishes and cooler emotions. She didn't look at me as she asked, "You're not going to ruin Christmas, are you?" I turned toward her, slowly. "Maybe it's already ruined," I said. She didn't reply. And for the first time in years, I didn't fill the silence. It arrived 2 days before Christmas, just as the sun broke through a week of Idaho snow clouds. A small, neat package on the front step of my apartment. I recognized the handwriting before I even picked it up. "For Orla, do not open until Christmas. Love, Aunt Verena." She was the only one who ever sent me something without being prompted. No group gifting, no scribbled names tagged on a communal gift. Just one person thinking of me as an individual, not a supporting role. I placed the box under the small tree in my living room, the same one I'd used for the past 5 years. White lights, no ornaments. It was more symbol than celebration. But still, it stood. That afternoon, I drove to the house for a quick drop-off. Cranberry sauce I'd been told to just bring in a jar, no need to fuss. I left it in the fridge and chatted briefly with Dad before slipping into the living room. That's when I saw it. My gift, my box, opened. The tissue paper was crumpled on the sideboard. At the scarf, hand-knitted, delicate, unmistakably Verena's work, was now wrapped around Calandra's shoulders. She laughed, twirling once in front of the mirror. "I found this on the steps this morning," she said. "No label or anything. I assumed it was for me. I mean, I actually wear scarves." I froze. "It had my name on it." Calandra waved her hand. "It must have fallen off. Besides, you're not really a scarf person, are you?" Myrna appeared behind her. "It's the thought that counts. We're all family. What's hers is yours, right?" I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I walked into the garage, closed the door, and screamed into my coat until my throat burned. That night, I opened my laptop. Cabin, fireplace, snow view, no Wi-Fi, no cell reception. I bookmarked 3 listings in McCall. I checked flights, car rental options, grocery delivery services. I even looked up nearby hiking trails and spa services. I wasn't playing around anymore. I started a folder on my desktop. Labeled it My Christmas. The first item, a screenshot of my flight confirmation. The second, a scanned note I had taped inside my planner from Verena 2 years ago. You get to decide what home feels like. For the first time in more years than I could count, I was actually looking forward to Christmas, not out of obligation, but out of rebellion. Not for them. For me. The next day, we gathered at Myrna's for brunch, casual, low stress, a place where conversation happened in carefully curated bursts, never too honest, never too long. I sipped coffee, biding my time. "Have you started prepping yet?" Calandra asked me. "I assume you're still doing the ham and sides?" I stirred my cup. Actually, I was thinking of going away this year. The room went still. Even the jazz music playing from the kitchen speaker seemed to dim. Myrna blinked. "Away?" I nodded. "Somewhere quiet? Just a few days." "You can't just walk away from tradition," she said, tone sharper than her fork. "It's your role. You know this." Calandra added. "Who's supposed to handle the menu? The timing? You've got that whole binder." "That binder has 2 decades of other people's expectations," I replied. No one laughed. They didn't want me. They wanted my output, my organization, my reliability. My absence wouldn't be mourned. It would be inconvenient. I left the table without finishing my coffee. I didn't bring it up again. I didn't offer explanations or repeat my plans. I just booked the cabin. It took less than 20 minutes to confirm everything: rental, meals, car. I forwarded myself all the details, printed a copy, and slipped it into my coat pocket like a passport. That night, I cooked for myself, a single-serving quiche and sautéed spinach. I ate with a candle lit, in silence, and for once, the quiet felt like mine. The next morning, Calandra texted, "I hope you're not serious about leaving. It would really ruin things." I stared at the message for a long time, then locked my phone. An hour later, a voicemail from Myrna. "This family counts on you. Don't disappoint us." The phrasing was surgical, not "we'd miss you," not "we'd like to spend time with you," just "don't disappoint." I played it once, then deleted it. I didn't reply to either of them. Instead, I pulled out my carry-on suitcase and began folding sweaters, the navy cable knit, the soft black one Verena gave me, the pajamas no one had ever seen because I usually slept on the guest room couch, half listening for oven timers. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The next morning, I arrived at work early. The air was crisp, the streets slushy. I brought in a thermos of tea, hung my coat on the rack, and opened my inbox. 3 unread emails, none from family. I was midway through replying to an invoice when I heard the receptionist's voice call from down the hallway. "Orla, your mom's here, says it's urgent." My heart stuttered. Myrna? At my office? I stepped out of my cubicle just in time to see her walking in, heels clicking, scarf tied like a magazine ad. In her hands, a clear bag of fabric swatches. "Let's pick table linens together," she said, smiling like nothing had happened, "like we always do." I stared at her, not surprised, not shaken, just done. Packing for the trip felt different this time. It wasn't rushed or frantic, like it always had been in the past. Me stuffing a suitcase on Christmas Eve while juggling a grocery list in my head. This time, I folded each sweater with care. I placed a paperback in the side pocket, along with a tin of peppermint tea. My hands moved with intention, deliberate, decisive. Then my phone buzzed, a notification from Calandra's Instagram. I opened it, against better judgment, and there it was, a carousel of images from last Christmas. At first, I thought it might be a repost, but no, it was new, curated, filtered, and captioned. Hosting is a love language I'm fluent in. The first image was our family dinner table. Dishes I had cooked, table settings I had arranged, lighting I had dimmed just right. Calandra stood at the head, her glass raised in a staged toast. No one else tagged. I scrolled further. One of her colleagues had commented, "Wow, you really do it all." Superwoman! My breath caught, not from shock, but from how numb I'd become to this very pattern. She didn't just forget to mention me, she erased me. I debated writing something, a comment, a question, something snide. But instead, I took a screenshot, then another, and another. I added them to the folder on my desktop. My Christmas. I whispered to no one. This isn't just about being forgotten anymore. It's a campaign. 2 days later, we had dinner at Myrna's again. Something casual, but nothing in that house was ever truly casual. Calandra arrived last, in a winter white wrap dress, hair done like a magazine model. She kissed the air beside my cheek. "You look cozy," she said, with the tone you'd use to describe someone wearing pajamas to a wedding. We sat, pasta and roasted vegetables, garlic knots. I watched her maneuver the room, playing daughter, host, queen. She barely touched her food, too busy telling a story about a coworker who once brought boxed mashed potatoes to the office potluck. "I mean, it's not hard to make it from scratch," she said, laughing. "You just need a sense of pride." Myrna chimed in. "You've always been a natural in the kitchen, sweetheart. Honestly, you remind me of Aunt Susan's daughter-in-law. What's her name again? The one who does the elegant tablescapes?" "Tracy," Dad offered. "The one from Vermont." Myrna nodded. "Yes, that's her. Elegant, like you." Then she turned, looked right at me, and said, "Not like that one girl who always overcooked the turkey. Remember her?" Laughter. They were talking about me. No names, no direct finger-pointing, but everyone at that table knew. I smiled. Barely. "She sounds like a disaster." Calandra grinned, tilting her wine glass. "Presentation is half the meal, right?" I laughed along, but in my chest, something cracked. Clean, silent, irrevocable. Even their jokes had become coded attacks, not random, not careless, precise. That night, I added a note to my journal. This will be the last year they weaponize dinner. Back home, I dug through my email archives. I found the newsletter Calandra had sent out to her company's internal staff, the one that highlighted team holiday culture. In the section labeled Family Traditions, she described our meals, our stories, our recipes, every sentence crafted like poetry. But the poetry wasn't hers. One paragraph was lifted, verbatim, from a holiday poem I'd written 5 years ago for a family card no one remembered. There it was, my words, on her platform. I scrolled back through her social media, found 5 more posts with my food, my ideas, my handwriting. It was no longer about credit, it was about theft. I copied every piece, dated them, labeled them, not to expose her, but to remind myself I wasn't crazy. I thought of something a writer once said: stealing someone's story is the slowest kind of erasure. In my journal, I wrote, "Maybe I was the house elf of this family, useful, loyal, expected, but never celebrated. And for the first time in a long time, I started to sketch out a strategy, not revenge, not confrontation, just closure." The next brunch was smaller, just the core, Myrna, Dad, Calandra, and me. It was supposed to be simple, which meant no one made a fuss about my impending trip. Except they did. Calandra poured herself coffee, then asked with faux cheer, "You're really leaving for Christmas?" I nodded, biting into a piece of toast. "So we're just skipping the guilt this year?" she continued, trying to laugh. I wiped my mouth. "No skipping, just opting out." Dad cleared his throat. Myrna straightened in her seat. "If you go, You're not just disappointing us, she said. You're rewriting everything we've built. That word, rewriting, landed like a stone. I met her eyes. Maybe it's time someone edits the editor. Calandra blinked. Cute. Really cute. I finished my coffee, set the mug down, and stood. I'll text when I land. Or not. I was almost at the door when Calandra called out, Just don't expect any gifts this year. I paused, turned slightly. I never have, I said. Then I walked out, not fast, not dramatic, but finished. The recording had been sitting in my voice memo app for weeks before I finally listened to it again. I was cleaning out files on my phone, deleting duplicates, old grocery lists, voice reminders I no longer needed, when I saw the file labeled Garage Deck 2. I'd hit record by accident that day while dropping off a casserole at my parents' house. I remembered tossing my phone into my purse as I walked through the side entrance. I hadn't realized it captured the conversation Myrna was having with Mrs. Lawson next door. She's useful, Myrna had said, her voice warm and unbothered. But she's not what you showcase. Orla's just a background character. She said it so casually, so cleanly, like discussing drapes or meatloaf. I played it 5 times, not because I needed to confirm what I heard, but to fully absorb it. Background character. I uploaded it to my cloud, labeled it Truth 1. Not to share, not yet, but because it was mine now. My proof, my line in the sand. I thought of Toni Morrison's words. You want to fly? You got to give up the shit that weighs you down. That weight wasn't mine anymore. The email came 2 days later. A friend from college, Karen, who now worked at the same PR firm Calandra did, forwarded me a company-wide newsletter. Subject line, Spotlight Series, Holiday Excellence. I opened it without thinking. I shouldn't have. But there it was. Calandra's face, smiling, poised, lit by the warm hues of our family Christmas table. The write-up detailed how she hosted a multi-generational holiday dinner, complete with recipes passed down from her grandmother, and personally prepared a full-course meal to honor family tradition. I read the email 3 times. I still had the group chat screenshot where she texted me, Please save Christmas again. I have no time and no clue what I'm doing. I still had the recipe file I'd typed up for her, the playlist I'd curated, the calendar reminders I'd sent. And here she was, quoting my grandmother's fudge recipe like it was a family heirloom passed to her alone. I forwarded the newsletter to myself, labeled it Truth 2. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I got ready. That Saturday, I agreed to attend the family's pre-Christmas brunch. Not because I owed it to them, but because I wanted to see it all one last time. I didn't cook. I didn't bring anything. I didn't wear an apron. I walked in wearing white, wool coat, knit scarf, snow boots polished and intentional, clean, cold, sharp. Calandra opened the door, eyebrows lifting slightly. So the chef's off duty today? I smiled. Turns out I was never on salary. Her mouth tightened, just a little. Inside, the house was dressed to impress. Faux greenery, polished silver, dishes perfectly arranged. As usual, I hadn't been asked to help set up. They no longer needed me to build the illusion, just to occupy space in the final photo. I sat at the far end of the table, letting the clinking forks and shallow conversations swirl around me. Myrna laughed loudly across from one of Dad's cousins. We've worked so hard to keep Christmas perfect, she said, dabbing her napkin with grace. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out my phone, and pressed play on the memo. Her voice filled the air. She's useful, but she's not what you showcase. Orla's just a background character. Conversation halted. Someone dropped a fork. Calandra blinked, looking from me to Myrna, whose face was still, drained of its usual performance glow. I was walking into the garage, I said calmly. My phone recorded it. Myrna straightened in her seat. That was taken out of context. I stared at her. The context is my whole life. Calandra tried to recover. Okay, let's not make this a thing. Honestly, you've been so emotional lately. You're just mad because you're skipping out on Christmas this year. I opened my folder. Scrolled to the email. Actually, I'm mad, I said evenly. Because you stole my words, my recipes, my work, and claimed them publicly, in print, for professional gain. I turned the screen toward the table, Karen's forwarded newsletter, the headline, the photo. Calandra's jaw clenched. Myrna leaned over. We're family. That's what matters. Credit isn't the point. No, I said. Credit has always been the point. You just hoped I'd never ask for it. No shouting, no dramatics, just truths laid down like silverware. No one spoke for a while, not even Dad. I looked around that perfect table, the one I'd helped build for decades but was never meant to sit at fully, and saw the cracks forming in the illusion. And then I stood up, buttoned my coat. You've made a lot of memories without me, I said, my voice steady. Make this one count too. And I walked out. The morning after the brunch was quieter than I expected. Not the gentle, cleansing silence that follows a good night's sleep or a long cry. This was denser, like a fog resting on my chest. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort, only reminds you of what didn't happen. I lay in bed longer than usual, staring at the ceiling. My apartment felt unusually still, no scent of coffee brewing, no clatter of utensils or text tones lighting up the room. I eventually reached for my phone, not a single message from Myrna, not a missed call from Calandra, even the family group chat was still. That silence was louder than if they'd screamed at me. I replayed the memory in my head, the brunch, the table, Myrna's face when I played the recording, Calandra's frozen smile as I scrolled through the email on my phone. I'd expected something, maybe an explosion, maybe confrontation, but instead there was retreat, a quiet kind of collapse. I thought standing up would feel like liberation, but it felt like stepping into cold water. Shock. Numbness. Then, slowly, breath. Freedom isn't the absence of responsibility. It's the permission to choose your own. And I had chosen mine, but that didn't mean it came with a parade. I wrapped myself in my robe and went to the kitchen, made tea, and stared out the window. Idaho snow layered the sidewalks in fresh white. It looked peaceful. But I knew better. Snow doesn't erase, it just hides the mess underneath. The night before, I'd left 4 perfectly wrapped boxes on the sideboard at the brunch. One for Myrna, one for Calandra, one for Dad, and one labeled, "To whom it may concern." Each held a different form of receipt. Screenshots, the voice memo transcript, email chains. No notes. No gotcha commentary, just facts. Evidence. Calandra hadn't opened hers at the table. Myrna had looked at hers like it might bite. Only Verena, seated quietly in the corner, glanced at the tag, smiled slightly, and gave me the smallest nod. I didn't stay for dessert. I slipped out while someone was pouring coffee, my coat still smelling faintly of cinnamon from the pinecone centerpiece on the mantel. I didn't leave to win. I left to stop losing. My mind wandered to 2 Christmases ago. I had the flu. Fever, body aches, barely able to stand. Myrna came into my room with a bottle of orange Gatorade and a Ziploc bag of cold medicine. She set them down beside me, then pulled out her planner. "The turkey's in the fridge," she said. "If you could just prep it this afternoon, we'll take care of the rest." I remember blinking at her, too weak to even argue, but I still did it. Seasoned the bird, set the timer, took breaks between steps to lie down on the cool tile floor. That evening, when the guests arrived, I stayed in bed. No one brought me a plate. No one checked in. The party raged on without me. After everyone left, Myrna peeked in. "Next time, don't get sick so close to the holidays." I said nothing then, but now, standing by my window, I muttered aloud, "Even viruses didn't excuse me." That kind of neglect doesn't make headlines. It doesn't scream, but it rewrites you, slowly, softly. Later that day, my phone buzzed. A text from Calandra. "You humiliated us. Hope it was worth it." I didn't reply. Instead, I took a screenshot and added it to my folder. I labeled it, "Proof I was right to leave." A few minutes later, I got a message from my therapist confirming my holiday check-in. I tapped out a quick response. I might finally have something good to report. Then I returned to my tea. Cold now, still bitter. I let the silence settle around me. But this time, I wasn't waiting for it to be filled. I let it stay. The fallout didn't feel like victory. It didn't feel like freedom either. But it felt like something real. And that was enough. My phone buzzed again. Verena. This time, I answered. Christmas Eve arrived with the kind of snowfall people wrote songs about, soft, slow, covering everything like frosting on a cake. From the window of my cabin, the world looked almost too serene to be real. A quiet calm filled the space, broken only by the gentle boil of the kettle on the stove and the soft crackle of the fire in the hearth. I stood barefoot on the worn wood floors, wrapped in a thick cardigan, sipping spiced tea. The silence didn't press down like it used to. It expanded, breathing space where there had once been judgment and obligation. Back in Ketchum, however, things weren't going so smoothly. A text from a neighbor buzzed on my phone, accompanied by a blurry photo. In it, the dining table at my parents' house was half set, the centerpiece askew, the roast visibly raw in its pan. The caption read, "Is everything okay over there? It's not like your usual setup." I saved the image without replying. Tradition without respect is just an obligation with a bow. And they had wrapped that bow around me for years, calling it love. Calandra had tried to rally. I could almost hear her voice from memory. We can figure it out. But nothing ever did work when I wasn't involved. Because the truth was, I had been the glue, the backbone, the woman behind the curtain they never credited but always leaned on. And now that I was gone, they didn't know what to do with the pieces. I thought about the week before, when I moved the money. Every year, they handed me a check to manage things, buy decorations, ingredients, wine, floral arrangements. And every year they'd say, just send us the receipts, we'll sort it later. They never sorted it. I footed the bills. They forgot. And I swallowed it every time, like it was part of the family contract no one else signed. This year, I did it differently. I rerouted the funds into a private account, used it to pay for my cabin, my groceries, my freedom. At the family dinner, Myrna had opened a gift box expecting itemized lists and receipts. Inside, she found a folded note, printed on heavy cream paper. It read, "Labor isn't love. Neither is debt." No signature. She didn't need one. I didn't hear what she said when she opened it. Didn't need to. Because in that moment, they had to confront the real math. The years of unpaid emotional and literal labor I had carried alone. Money isn't the root of evil. Entitlement is. Later that evening, I pulled out a small charcuterie board I had made for myself. Aged cheddar, brie, rosemary crackers, a few dried figs. I opened a bottle of Cabernet and let Ella Fitzgerald's Christmas album play low in the background. My phone buzzed again. The family group chat was unraveling. Pings of panic. The roast is raw. Who bought the extra chairs? There's no backup dessert. I muted the thread. This year, my peace wasn't negotiable. I lit a few candles, adjusted the blanket over my lap, and journaled. Loneliness is waiting to be seen, I wrote. Solitude is choosing not to need an audience. They were finally facing a Christmas without me, and I was finally having one with me. An hour later, my inbox filled with quiet ripples. A direct message from Amber, an old high school friend. I saw your sister's party photos. The whole thing fell apart. I always wondered how you managed it all without combusting. A coworker emailed. Heard the family Christmas coordinator resigned. Did you really do all that on your own for 10 years? Respect. Even Verena texted. You've never sounded so calm. It suits you. I didn't reply to any of them immediately. I just sat with the warmth of being seen, without asking, without performing. And then came the notification I hadn't expected. A missed call from Myrna. No voicemail. A minute later, a text arrived. Let's talk. It's important. I didn't respond to her message. Let's talk, it said, short, cold, too late. I didn't ignore it out of anger or to punish her. I ignored it because I could. because for the first time in my life, the silence between us felt like mine to control. I sat by the fireplace in the cabin, sipping tea from a chipped ceramic mug, watching flakes of snow disappear against the window. There was no clock ticking, no one rushing me to carve the roast, no phone vibrating with passive-aggressive reminders or last-minute tasks they called traditions. I opened my journal and wrote slowly. I used to fill the air so no one had to sit in discomfort. Maybe now they can learn how it feels. The world outside was still. I didn't check the group chat. I didn't wonder what time dinner was or who remembered to light the candles. For the first time in years, I no longer needed a reply, because I already knew who I was without one. I called Myrna the next afternoon. I wanted no loose ends. She picked up on the second ring. "Orla," she said, tight-lipped, like my name had turned into something bitter. "I'm returning your call," I said. She didn't waste time. "You've made your sister cry." I waited a beat. "I'm not responsible for her tears. I'm responsible for my boundaries." "You're isolating yourself," she snapped. "You're pulling away from the family." "I didn't isolate," I replied. "I extracted myself from a pattern." A pause. Then she exhaled, weary. "You've always been dramatic." "No," I said. "I've just stopped whispering." She didn't respond to that. The silence wasn't sharp. It wasn't cold. It was just final. "I'm not coming back this year," I continued. "Not for dinner, not for the performance, not for any of it. Orla, this isn't how families work. This is how our family worked. I'm choosing something else now." There was no yelling, no slammed phone, just a low click, and the line went dead. I set the phone down and leaned back into the couch. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel broken. I felt clear, not because anything had been fixed, but because I didn't need it to be anymore. That evening, while snow blanketed the trees outside, I got a message from my cousin Allison. We hadn't spoken in a year, maybe more. She'd always been quiet during family events, hovering on the edge of things, never inserting herself. Her message was long, thoughtful. "I heard what happened at brunch. I wanted to say thank you for standing up, for saying the quiet things out loud. I hope I can do that one day." I read it 3 times. It didn't change the damage. It didn't erase the years. But it felt like something had finally landed, like someone had noticed I was there all along. "Sometimes we don't need an apology," she wrote at the end. "We just need acknowledgement." I closed my phone and let the gratitude settle. Healing doesn't always come from the people who hurt you, as sometimes it comes from the ones who watched silently and finally found the courage to speak. The next morning, I started dismantling the life I used to perform in. I opened my laptop and deleted the file titled Holiday Binder 2008-2022. I tossed the printed recipe cards into the fire. I recycled the ribbon stash and the extra gift tags. The traditions weren't mine anymore. They were expectations someone else attached to me. I framed a new photo. It was from 2 nights ago. Me on the porch, holding a mug of cocoa, smiling softly at the camera. Alone, but not lonely. I whispered to myself, "This is what surviving yourself looks like." At lunch, a coworker named Janelle poked her head into my office. "Still up in the cabin?" she teased. "Still free," I said. She laughed. "Any holiday drama this year?" I paused, then smiled. "I don't do rehearsals anymore, just premieres." And I meant it. That evening, I lit a candle and turned off all the overhead lights. The cabin glowed with that kind of softness you don't get from bulbs, only from warmth you made yourself. I wrote in my journal again. I didn't break the family. I just stopped pretending it wasn't broken. A knock at the door pulled me from the page. I froze for a second. No one should have been out this far. Not in this weather. I opened it slowly. Verena stood there, cheeks pink from the cold, scarf wrapped tight, holding a small pie tin in her gloved hands. "You're hard to find," she said, "but I brought pie." I stepped aside and let her in. When I opened the cabin door, I expected the wind, maybe a stray pine cone caught in the draft, but not Verena. She stood there, cheeks flushed from the hike up the hill, holding a small pie tin wrapped in an old dish towel and a folded envelope wedged under her arm. "You're hard to find," she said, smiling. "But I brought pie." I stepped aside without a word and let her in. The heat from the fire welcomed her quicker than I did. We sat for a long moment, saying nothing. She placed the pie on the table, cherry by the scent of it. The kind she always brought to 4th of July picnics, the kind Calandra always said was too tart. Finally, Verena cleared her throat. "They called me. I knew they would. I knew you'd want space." I nodded, still not speaking. She reached into her coat and pulled out a letter. "From your mother. I haven't read it." I took it without a word, unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was pristine, just like always. Years of calligraphy classes for wedding invites and PTA events hadn't gone to waste. The letter was long. Pages of apologies disguised as reflections, sentences that started with, "I never meant to," and "You always seemed so strong." Justifications wrapped in maternal guilt. I read each line aloud, slowly, calmly. My voice didn't shake, not even when I reached the part where she wrote, "I was doing the best I could." When I finished, I set it down and smiled, not out of joy, but recognition. "She's still trying to write the ending," I said, "but this chapter was mine." Later, I pulled out an old journal from the shelf. Dog-eared, ink splotched. I flipped to a page I hadn't touched in over 2 years, a letter I wrote in anger, in clarity, and never intended to send. "If you ever decide to see me instead of just use me," it began, "here's what I wish you knew." Verena sat across from me, hands folded in her lap. I read it aloud, every paragraph a scar I had named, every line a boundary I had stitched from unraveling threads. "You didn't just survive them," Verena whispered when I finished. "You outgrew them." I folded the letter, walked to the fireplace, watched it burn, not for revenge, for release. The next morning I made coffee and sat with my contact list, names I had kept for decades out of habit, family friends, distant cousins, people who sent mass texts at New Year's but never called when I was sick. One by one, I deleted them. Then I wrote 2 cards, one to Myrna, one to Calandra, simple cream cardstock, 1 sentence on each. "This season, I am choosing peace over patterns. No dramatic flourish, no closure request, just a withdrawal of labor they never acknowledged." My therapist called later that afternoon. "You've done more than reclaim your voice," she said. "You've redrawn the entire map." And I had. I hadn't burned the bridge, I just stopped crossing it. You don't owe a return trip to people who never met you halfway. That evening, I set up my tripod in front of the fireplace and clicked the shutter. Me, in soft flannel, holding a mug of cocoa wrapped in the gray scarf Verena resent after the first had been taken. I framed the photo carefully, lit from the side, cozy, not curated. I posted it with one line, "Finally celebrating peace, hashed my way." I didn't expect responses, but they came anyway. Coworkers, former classmates, even strangers who'd stumbled across my page. "You look free. Something about this feels brave. I wish I had the strength." I didn't reply to most. And then one notification stopped me. A message from Calandra. "I didn't realize how loud my silence was until you stopped listening." I let it sit unread, not out of spite, but because not everything deserves a reply. Some things are better left right where they are. I stood by the cabin window and watched the snow fall in long streaks, softening the world. My reflection stared back, no longer a shadow behind someone else's spotlight, but a woman who had found her own lamp and lit it. Some people leave. Others get left. The strongest thing I ever did was stay gone.